We'll do it live. We'll do it live. What's up, everybody? Welcome to one of my first videos. Appreciate you checking out the channel. We're just gonna jump right into it. So today, what are we talking about? We're talking about some of my biggest mistakes and regrets I've made over my decade-long career. Let's hop into it. Once I had been working in the industry for a few years and wasn't getting called strictly to PA jobs, I immediately decided to put my focus in the camera department. And that was great in a lot of ways, and I learned a lot of things. It didn't necessarily set me up well to be a good DP. Let me explain why. When you're working in the camera department, you kind of have your head down. You're focusing on, all the million different variables that there are for any given shoot. You're making sure that the camera build's working as it should. Video Village is getting a good signal. You are trying to anticipate the DP's needs and wants before he or she says what they are. Your brain's always on, you're always moving, you're always concerned about the next setup and the setup after that so that you're prepared and you're not wasting time. That doesn't give you a lot of time to take in what's happening around you and observe and learn from it. You're kind of in the trenches until you wrap. There's just not a lot of margin. G&E, I feel like, has a different workflow entirely. And I'm not trying to say that G&E works less hard than camera department. It's probably the other way around. What I like about the G&E workflow is you have setup, setup, setup. Then you get a bit of a break while takes are rolling. Maybe you're setting up for the next setup. That definitely happens a lot. But you're very much hands-on with lighting and rigging and all the things that actually shape the scene. Whereas if you're, 2AC or 1AC on a gig, you are very focused on, all right, we're doing this lens change. We got to make sure that we've got this specific camera build for this setup, and we need to make sure the DP's happy with all the extraneous things. I feel like the main thing I would have changed would be to go back and try to split more of my focus and do some more G&E work. There are so many cinematographers who have come up from lighting department and are just so much more well-equipped to be a DP in the real world. You know how to come into a location and light it properly. When you're on a tech scout, you know the things to look for, like where's the power? Is there power? Are we gonna need to bring in generators? If we shoot at this time of day, that's when it's gonna look best. That is more deeply ingrained into somebody who's done a lot of G&E work than somebody who has done strictly camera department work. As a cinematographer, one of your main abilities that you are tapping into every day on set is, how am I gonna light this? While camera specs and knowing how to link and reset a Teradek is a great skill to have, I feel that that information often clogs my brain on shoot day when I should just rely on my ACs to kind of take care of all of that stuff. A lot of the filmmakers that I look up to are total encyclopedias of cinema and cinema history. I feel like that can inform so many of the decisions that you're making on the day, especially for a narrative piece. And I just really feel like I didn't care about that when I first started. I cared about the cool, slick camera and the latest piece of technology and whatever else. And having a do-over, I would go back and study film history, study the greats, study Truffaut, Hitchcock, all these people that built what is now contemporary cinema. So when it comes to making creative, motivated decisions on the day when we're shooting, I'm drawing more on my technical information and my technical know-how instead of feeling and emotion. Not all of that is bad information to have, but it's one of those things that instead of thinking about, well, how would we get this shot? It's more thinking about, why would we get this shot? Do we need this shot? Do we need it to be different? Do we need the camera movement to be different? One of my good buddies, who is an amazing cinematographer who lives in Brooklyn, his name is James Martin. Check him out, jamesmartindp.com. He said something to me a couple years ago. He was just like, invest in your taste, invest in your taste. I'm such a gearhead. I love gear. Gear is amazing. The tools that we use help us make better stuff. That's definitely true, but it's not everything. Over the years, I've invested a lot in my skill set, but I haven't really spent as much time investing in my taste and what I like and why. If I could go back, I would change that. I would study cinema more. I would understand the motivation behind things and try to let that inform my work a little bit more than what's the coolest, newest, shiniest toy I can bring on a set. Once you get to a certain point in your career where you've got some reps, you kind of know what you're doing when you show up on a day, gear really doesn't matter as much. Let me explain why. Technology has only gotten cheaper and better in the last couple of decades. And the good thing about that is that it creates a pretty even playing field. Even some of the cheaper cameras that are on the market right now produce an amazing image. And so if you know what you're doing, if you have the skills and if you have the taste, you can kind of create whatever you want, regardless of the tools that you have in front of you. Do you need an Alexa 35 to shoot every single project? Do you need to be shooting on an Alexa to be the best DP? No, you don't. I think one of the bigger mistakes that I've made in my career is believing the lie that I have to have a certain echelon of camera or a certain echelon of lens or whatever, fill in the blank. I have to have XYZ piece of gear to be legit. That is bullshit. If you know what you're doing with the gear that you have, that's way more important than having the newest, best stuff. Because you could have an Alexa 35 and a Cooke anamorphic on there, and if you don't know how to light and you don't know how to block and you don't know what motivated camera movement is, then you're probably going to make something that sucks. So take your time and your money and invest in those other things. This is a bit of a random one, but one of the mistakes that I've made in my career was joining the union. That's right, I was a local 600 utility, camera utility for a few years, and really I made the mistake of joining up too early. For most of my life, I lived in Atlanta, and as I'm sure most of you know, it's one of the best film markets in the United States and really in the world. And so there was a ton of work happening there, both non-union and union. The main reason that I say that it was a mistake is because I joined up a little too early. I didn't know that many people who were working on union productions. I knew maybe 2-3 guys. Their crews ran pretty tight, so there wasn't a lot of day playing opportunities for me. So what did that look like? At the end of the day, it looked like I was stuck with a pretty steep initiation fee plus quarterly dues that I was having to pay and not really recouping any of that investment because I wasn't really working that much. I think over the course of 2 years, I only worked about 10 days. You know, sure, I could have done better at marketing myself and networking and that kind of thing, but I had a lot of freelance stuff going on kind of simultaneously. And also I was realizing that I really just wanted to get my hands on the camera and start shooting stuff. And in terms of being in the union, I was a long way away from doing that. So going back, I probably would have said, don't join the union, wait until you know a lot of people who are working, or don't join at all because the type of work that you want to do is not that work anyways. I'm not trying to tell you to not join the union, but if you are like me and you don't know a bunch of people who are working, then I would say work on it for a little bit, build up your Rolodex, meet more people, network more, then make the decision to join because you'll have a better chance of being hired consistently over time. All right, this next point might be a bit of a touchy subject for some of us. It has been for me for a lot of years, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Let's talk about money. I feel like financial literacy is pretty lacking with most people that are below the line in our industry. We're taught about how to grind and grind and grind, but nobody really talks about how to exit the grind. There's not a lot of talk inside of the film community about like how to manage money, how to make it work for you, how to set yourself up for success in the future when it comes to money, aka retirement, aka whatever that means to you. This is an area that I'm extremely lacking in knowledge and skills. I've spent the last couple years devoting more of my time to learn how to be better at understanding money, managing it, spending it, saving it. If I could encourage any of you watching this video, I would say divert 25 to 35% of the energy that you are putting into learning your skill set and developing your film career and put it towards learning about money, how it works, what interest rates are, loans, high yield savings accounts, having a good CPA, filing your taxes, setting up an S Corp for your business. Those were things that nobody ever showed me how to do. Devoting more of my time to this earlier on in my career would have given me more margin and flexibility in life and in my filmmaking. On the note of money and gear, another mistake that I've made over the years was buying the cheap thing or even the mid-tier thing. Probably 4 years ago, I just decided, you know what, if I'm gonna buy a piece of gear, it's gonna be good, it's gonna be trusted, it's gonna be the industry standard. Since I've made that decision, I really haven't regretted it because I have ended up with several pieces of gear that go on most every job with me, and for the most part, don't break, are better and easier to use, and last longer, and also hold their value longer. So if I end up wanting to sell a piece of kit after a couple of years, I'm not losing out on that investment as much as I would with a cheaper piece of gear, because you're always going to find a situation where you need to rent that or you need to have it on set. And if you don't have it, aka you have the cheaper thing is probably going to sit in a box and collect dust at home, while you pay a rental house or somebody else a kit fee or a rental fee to get the thing that's the industry standard. The worst thing is to have something crap out on you when you're in the middle of a job. It's happened to me several times because I cheaped out on something and it failed on the day. And I'm not saying that that's gonna happen guaranteed if you buy a Godox light instead of an Aputure light, but the odds are definitely higher because the better, nicer thing has oftentimes a better QC process and also better warranties, better repairs, all that kind of stuff. In the end, it just ends up working out better and smoother when you use good stuff. So buy good stuff. Another mistake that I've made over the years of my career is kind of chronically undervaluing myself. There's a few layers to this. Let me start by saying this. It's totally okay to accept some low-paying work if things are slow or if you have extra bills that you need to pay, if you're just trying to make ends meet. But if things are kind of normal, when you accept low-paying work, especially if you do it a few times in a row, it kind of starts to build this inertia, and then you find yourself in a cycle that's a little hard to break. Scott Balcom has a pretty awesome video that describes perfectly the race to the bottom. It's a really good picture of what undercutting each other in the industry can do to the entire ecosystem. Really, it's kind of hard to understand and think outside of the bubble of myself and my bottom line and think about the industry as a whole, but really there are some pretty extreme ramifications, especially in the day and age of AI. And so if I could go back and change some things, what would I do? I would say no to low-paying jobs unless I absolutely needed them, because most of the time what ended up happening is I would show up on that low-paying job and get worked really hard, get worked into overtime and not paid for it. And then what happens is I get home that day after a super long day and I'm burnout and I'm tired and I'm exhausted and I'm a little pissed off because I'm not getting what I know I deserve. What I've learned is the more confident you are, the more upfront you are about those conversations, especially early on, talking with a producer or a director or whoever's doing the hiring for a project, even talking directly to the client if it's that type of job. The more clear, the more concise, the more upfront you are, the better it goes. One thing that's really helped me in this area is picking a day rate and sticking to it. Unless it's a really special circumstance like a project for a close friend or a project for a nonprofit or something like that. If somebody asks me what my rate is and they ask me if I can go lower, I usually just say no. And you just keep it calm, cool, professional. You know, you don't insult the other person or anything like that. You just say, hey, if you can't pay my rate, then I'm sorry, we can't work together. And I've just really come to understand the power of saying no to things. Usually what happens is when I say no to a low-paying job, another job at the standard rate, or maybe even a better than standard rate, comes up right around the same time. That's not a scientific formula. It doesn't always happen. But something comes along that is the right project, that's the right fit. And I've just noticed that trend over my career. And it's definitely true more times than it isn't. Another thing that I would say is if you're doing direct to client work or you're kind of bidding on a whole project, start with a higher number and always pad your numbers. The worst possible thing, this mistake I've made so many times, is having to go back to the client and say, well, actually, we're gonna need to spend more money on this and this because of this and this. And really, if you can just thoroughly bid out a project and then add 20 or 30% to that total number, it usually covers for any gaps that you might have. And then if you don't have any gaps and you've bidded that, inflated number and you're able to do the job for what you were originally thinking, then you've got extra money in your budget to play around with or pocket at the end of the job. For my last point, I kind of want to talk about something that I think is maybe the most important, and that's free time and margin. I've spent the vast majority of my career with no margin and not a lot of free time. That has significantly impacted my relationships and my health and pretty much all other aspects of my life. One of the biggest mistakes I've made, if not the biggest, is overworking myself. to the point where about 18 months ago, I had a panic attack for the first time in my life, to the point where I thought I was having a seizure and I had to get in an ambulance and go to the hospital at 3:30 in the morning. My wife was like 7.5 months pregnant, and let's just say that I could have avoided all of that by managing my time and giving myself some margin in life. And also maybe talking to a therapist more. That whole process was a pretty eye-opening experience for me. If I look at some of the busiest and most stressful times in my life, a lot of that was due to overworking myself, not getting enough sleep, not eating well, and not processing a lot of the mental turmoil that was going on at the time. Where that gets you at the end of the day, or at the end of 5 years, as it probably was in my case, is waking up at 3:30 in the morning thinking you're having a seizure when really you're having a panic attack because you haven't given yourself margin to deal with the stuff of life. Take 1 day a week off every week, whether it's Saturday or Tuesday or whatever. It doesn't matter. Don't work 7 days a week. Try to take a vacation when you can. I know those are things that not everybody can do, but if you make it a priority and you make it a habit, 6 months, a year, a couple years will go by and you'll look back and say, oh, wow, I have my sanity. What I would say to any of you who are watching this video is you can't put a price on peace of mind. I can't tell you how much work I've had to do over the last year to work on my mental health, to work on my finances, to work on my relationships because of the unhealthy systems that I had set up due to a lot of reasons, but kind of the main reason is just saying yes to too much work. A lot of people are probably thinking, well, if I say no to jobs, or if I try to take a vacation every year, or try to only work 5 or 6 days a week, then I'm going to be losing out on money, and that's going to cause me to be stressed. And that's kind of true, but not really. What I've noticed is the more I've said no to jobs, the more I've said no to things that are, on paper, even really good opportunities to prioritize my mental health, my relational health, my family. The more I've done that, the less stressed I've been. And what I've realized is that in the end, the whole financial aspect of it usually ends up working out. Maybe I could make more money than I make if I worked 7 days a week, every week. But I think I would be more stressed, and I think everything else in my life would be worse. So, is it a good trade? I don't know. You tell me. Overall, what I would say about this last point is that taking some time for yourself, or taking some time for you and those close relationships that you have around you, is so important. And if you don't do it, you're gonna burn out and probably have a mental freak out like I did. Don't say I didn't warn you. That's it for this video. Thanks for taking some time to watch. Hopefully one of these things was helpful for you to hear. If it was, like, subscribe, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you want to hear more content like this. Hopefully I'm going to be doing more stuff like this in the future. So thanks again for watching. Hopefully we'll see you on the next video.